great in the world, like 83 to 2000, and then we hit 9/11, and they've been terrible ever since. The geopolitical cycle is going to continue to get worse for the next 5 years. So anybody thinks all this terrorism and civil wars and Russia and Ukraine is over, this stuff's only going to get worse, and stock markets tend to be at half the valuations in a negative cycle. So this is another reality the market's not getting. Third, innovation cycles. We've seen the best of the internet. It's not that innovation is going to stop, but innovations matter when they move fully mainstream and affect everyday people, not just niche markets, where everybody's got the internet and broadband and an iPad, an iPhone, and a smartphone, and a this and that. And so we've seen the best gains from that. But finally, the most potent cycle I found, and only about 3 years ago, is a boom-bust cycle that I used to follow on a rote 10-year cycle, and I finally found out it was actually tracked to sunspot cycles. And sunspot cycles are great because nobody understands them. And number two, scientists actually focus on predicting these cycles. They're not 10 years on average like the overall boom cycles have been in the last century. They're 8 to 13 years, so you have to get them right. And there's serious scientists that do. And they predicted the last sunspot cycle would peak in November, December of 2014, and it peaked in February of 2015. So that's great for me. And this cycle, all four of these point down at the same time. This only happens once in a generation. It was the early to mid 70s this happened. That was the worst crisis we had back then, the worst stock crash, the worst recession. And then, of course, the early 30s, the Great Depression hit when all four of these cycles are down. So my research has evolved from demographics, but I found the other factors that really, really matter. And when all these four cycles point down, you need to understand this. You need to protect the assets you've gained out of this.
Well, I want to talk about how you do that, and I want you to walk through this. We're putting on screen an article from 6 years ago, London Guardian, where their Ministry of Defense came out, and the report's linked, Revolution, Flash Mobs, Brain Chips, A Grim Vision of the Future. Their military actually says everything you're saying. Our Pentagon, in deeper reports, says what you're saying. The truth is, as you said, the top 1% of the 1% do understand this. They won't tell the public. I want to ask you why. I wish this wasn't true, but undoubtedly, unless everything changes with all their weird computers and manipulation, we're going there, but now we see the signs of it. But before we go there, let me ask you this, Mr. Dent. What, in your view, is the real economy rate if they say it's 0.2%?
Well, we just put out an issue of our newsletter where we pretty much said it looks like we're already in recession starting in December or January. And the markets are acting like everything's fine. They're looking at lagging indicators like jobs and housing. Those are the last things to go. The leading indicators, capital investment, things like that, have been going down. Retail sales have been miserable, and they keep blaming it on the weather. Well, the cold weather is months behind us, and they're still slow. So we're looking at the indicators that matter now, and they're saying we're not really coming out of this. In fact, it looks like we're going deeper in recession. So, again, nobody can say this. When I go on normal news programs, financial news, I got 2 or 3 minutes, and I can't say anything to convince anybody. Everybody else on there has some special interest. Stockbrokers can't tell people, or they'll sell their stocks and run. Real estate agents can't tell people the truth, or they won't buy a house. No economist can tell people the truth. So, that's why the only people I can affect are people that, on a show like this where I get in front of you for a while, and if people will actually go to a seminar or read the book, because what I'm saying is very contrary. So even people who would like to tell people can't, because nobody would believe it anyway. So that's why we offer this free book. I want to show another chart you just pulled up. Again, what people don't understand, this is something never has happened in history. Ever since the Federal Reserve was created in 1913, they always manipulate short-term interest rates. You get a slowdown, you get a stock crash, or anything goes wrong, they push short-term rates to zero. They make money free to help stimulate lending. Those zero short-term rates mainly affect investment because investors will use that to leverage up. And so that causes speculation. What they've never done before on a mass scale is what this chart was showing. They have pushed long-term risk-free interest rates. This is a 10-year Treasury bond, the risk-free longer-term bond. And it used to be, before QE, you get 2% above this risk-free rate for taking a 10-year risk. Now they push this down to zero. Now people don't understand. The best economists do. If people understand, every financial asset, real estate, stocks, bonds, are directly affected by how low this risk-free rate. The difference between 2 and 0 is huge for mortgages and for the value of real estate. It's huge for the value of stocks when you project the earnings forward 10 years and discount them back to the present by that risk-free rate. It's a huge difference if it's 0 or 2%. So what the Federal Reserve and central banks have done around the world, again, unlike any crisis in the past, they've said the solution to this debt crisis, the solution to this giant financial bubble that they created in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s is to keep the bubble going forever and just to make it more insane. So they're calling this an economic or experiment. This is insanity, to create trillions of dollars and pump up assets way more than they're worth, suck everybody into them. Everybody thinks you can't lose money on stocks, can't lose money on real estate. The Federal Reserve won't let them go down. When this thing goes down, people are going to lose money rapidly. I remind people that when the tech bubble burst, now it took almost 3 years for that bubble to burst fully, 80%. The first 40% happened in the first 2.5 months. If you don't get out of this and protect yourself ahead of time, it will be too late. That's what the smart money is doing. Most people will never see this coming. So there's no more important time to understand what's happening. The real economy has been unfavorable since late 2007 because of demographics. We predicted that would happen 20 years ago and predicted it would happen before it happened in Japan. They were the first to go down. Europe is next, including Germany. So the fundamentals are bad. We had the greatest debt bubble in history. Debt grew at 2.6 times GDP for 25 years from 1983 to 2008. Any economist that doesn't think that's a problem in a crisis brewing, we've never had debt grow that fast, that long.
Harry Dent is our guest. Harry, let me ask you this question. Obviously, the elites are digging in with the police state. They think it's going to protect them. But if you've got people in the Depression starving to death when they were somewhat self-sufficient, what's going to happen today with this entitlement society by the middle class, by the elites, by the 100 million people that are on food assistance in the U.S., 101 million? It seems like a perfect storm once this all unravels. A. B, central banks have been caught. It's in the news. They're going to be meeting in a few weeks secretly in London to push to ban cash worldwide. They've already been pushing it openly. So those 2 points, how bad will it get? I mean, I know it's on average. I know there's 100 ways this can happen. But how does the decadence, the entitlement, the whole just-in-time to market fragility of the system affect it? And then how does that tie in to the other points that I was bringing up?
Well, this is going to be a global crisis because it's a global bubble, stocks everywhere, real estate everywhere. And it's when real estate crashes that you get the worst problems because real estate is financed and now heavily, often with no money down, by mortgages. So it's heavily levered. So that's why the last downturn was so bad because real estate crashed. But real estate is yet to crash in most cities around the world. So that's going to be the first reality. It's not just stocks that go down. People don't get hit as hard when stocks go down. Real estate goes down. The banking system gets hit. People are underwater. They can't refinance. Now, the two areas I'm most worried about, because we've already seen Europe go through part of this crisis and Japan now for decades. Those are very civil places with older populations and not as much kind of crime and violence. I worry about the United States because we have a very polarized society. The rich have been getting richer. The poor have been getting poorer. Like you said, you got all these entitlements built up. The top 0.1% controls massive amounts of wealth. And so I think there's going to be that polarized situation is going to lead to some level of civil unrest. And then, of course, I'm most worried about China for those 250 million people with no skills who are going to have to squat in an unfinished apartment and can't even move back to their rice paddies because they've been paved over with nothing. They're going to be trapped. And so I do think people have to worry, not just protect your investment, where you live. You want to live farther out rather than farther in. You want to live between the Allegheny Mountains and the Rocky Mountains and not on the coast if you can. I think we are going to see some level of civil unrest, even though people can argue, oh, well, Japan's been through this for 2.5 decades and they haven't seen civil unrest. Well, they're an older society. They got no
well, the
guns.
Japanese didn't rob each other when their country was all bombed to the ground. So they act better as when they're attacked instead of we act worse. Let's just be honest about it. We're going to break. I want to ask you this question, and you're right. The elites are moving off the coast into the middle of the country, into the Ozarks and stuff, and building redoubts. I mean, that's got to concern people, and billionaires are doing that across the board. But I want to ask you, the White House strategy, I know you're not political on these issues, but the White House and Soros and others really are trying to get a summer of rage, entitlement, class warfare going when there's some of the most entitled people out there. What's the strategy behind that with Mr. Dent? Straight ahead, you can get his book free, except for $5, $4.95 shipping and handling. I don't want to give up too much info on air. But generally, if we have some intel privately, we can just go search it and find it somewhere else in mainstream news or alternative news or in a C-SPAN statement or something. But the whole Carnegie Mellon family and their foundations have been moving into diversified portfolios, into digital, into a bunch of other things, into farmland, things like that, for quite a while, and are predicting a massive crash by the end of next year. And then I was separately talking to a source about this, and we did a search, and Nico is in there printing it, because I'd forgotten to do this, and there's an article mentioning something in that area. So all I'm saying is the elite are acting like it's the end of the world. And then they have national news attacking us because we cover this, saying we're insane, nothing's going to happen, everything's fine. Man, I would love to be wrong. But see, I'm not wrong. I'm going off what the big money is doing. And there's even an article, The Future of Money, BNY Mellon, the next generation of currency. They're pushing there's going to be a collapse, go to digital. Again, they're global SDR out of the crisis, and they've got the big banks openly meeting and pushing and making statements about banning cash. What's up with the war on cash, and how is the different arms of the establishment, Harry Dent, going to try to ride this crisis into more power?
Well, everybody wants to keep this bubble. Again, it's been created for decades now. They want to keep it going. You can't keep a bubble going forever. This is an impossible task, but people will do desperate things, like the government just keeps printing more money. Well, every time they have to up the ante, they have to do double and then triple. And that's what the Japanese have been doing, and now the Europeans. And so all of this stuff is strategies that just try to keep this going, at least until the next administration or the next group gets in. Nobody wants to have the next Great Depression on their watch. And I mean, you can't blame people for that, but that's why nobody's telling you the truth. And everybody just hopes we can keep this thing going. You cannot keep this thing going.
Well, answer my question. I mean, I know you like to go off scientific stuff and graphs and facts, and you make accurate predictions, but you're a smart guy separately from that. They're clearly activating leftist goon mobs, communist race baiters for riots. Why would the White House, Justice Department, and George Soros want to play with fire like that? What is the strategy there?
I don't know about Soros, but anybody in the political establishment will do what it takes to benefit them, especially in a difficult situation. So, I mean, I don't get, like you said, on the political side as much, because as soon as I get too political, I alienate half the people. So I just say, look, I can tell you what's going to happen over the rest of your lifetime today. Our 4 cycles will show you where the economy's headed over the rest of your lifetime, your kids' lifetime, for your business, everything. So why wouldn't you want to know that? These are objective indicators that make sense.
But undoubtedly, whether it's this year or next year, all hell's getting ready to break loose.
Yeah, our show, in the short term, we show that the danger period is 2015 and 16, and then again in 2018 and 19. Those are probably the most dangerous years ahead. And I think the worst are likely to be in the next 2. So I would agree with that report earlier that by the end of 2016, we're likely to see something major occur. So you can't afford to wait here and say, well, I'll wait and see, and then I'll prepare. Now, you better prepare now.
Absolutely. Well, folks can get a free copy of your best-selling book. I appreciate you doing that at harrydentbook.com. In closing here, just in 30 seconds, what are you doing to protect your money?
Basically, the best thing to do is to be in cash. I also buy options where I can say I'm willing to lose this amount of money, but I'm going to make 10 times my money. When the markets have been going up this much with little volatility, you can buy, if you should talk to a professional, you can buy.
I tell you what, can you do 5 more minutes on what you're doing?
Yeah,
1 minute break. Okay, we'll do a 1 minute break. Go into overdrive, Infowars.com/show. Thanks to